Smokey Robinson, the man whose voice melted hearts and whose lyrics defined generations, was always seen as the picture of grace and soul. A symbol of romantic love, timeless music, and smooth charisma. But behind that velvet voice and tender smile was a much more complicated man, one whose truth was far from the polished legend. And once that truth started to unravel, fans were left with a question they never thought they'd ask. Who was the real Smokey Robinson? His songs told stories of longing and devotion, but his life? That was a story of struggle, secrets, and shadows hiding just beyond the spotlight. There's a haunting echo in the way he once sang about wanting to hold someone just one more time. Those lyrics feel different when you realize they might have been about a woman he could never truly claim. Smokey later admitted that while married, he carried on a hidden relationship, a connection with Diana Ross that blurred the lines of friendship, loyalty, and fame. And that's just one thread in the tangled web of his life. He wasn't simply living the dream, he was barely holding it together. Behind the fame, he was battling addiction, caught in legal fights, and living with the heavy burden of a son born from a relationship no one knew about. At one point, he was so frail that his clothes literally couldn't stay on. He was 6 feet 1 inch and weighed only 120 pounds. Pants wouldn't even fit, so he held them together with safety pins. That image doesn't match the man millions adored. But Smokey wasn't just a hitmaker. He was unraveling in silence, grieving the loss of friends, clinging to the songs that built his empire, and struggling to stay grounded as his life spiraled out of control. The courtroom confessions, the whispered stories, and the public silences finally began to collide. He found himself standing face to face with the woman he had hurt, his wife Claudette, after keeping his other life hidden for years. When he admitted the truth, she had only one response. She told him to leave. And in his words, he didn't blame her. For many women, there's a line you just don't cross. And Smokey had stepped over it long ago. But before the chaos and heartbreak, there was just a skinny boy from Detroit with big dreams and a burning desire to sing. Born into poverty, raised in a small house packed with relatives, he grew up in a city weighed down by poverty and pain. Yet even in that cramped home, Smokey dreamed beyond the walls. Detroit was rough. Addiction and crime lurked around every corner, but music gave him a way out. By 17, he had written over 100 songs, even if no one had heard them yet. Music wasn't just a passion, it was his lifeline. He and the Miracles didn't form for fame. They were just trying to eat. Every lyric was survival. Every melody was escape. Then came Berry Gordy. One listened to Shop Around, and Berry knew Smokey was more than a gifted voice. He was Motown's secret weapon. In no time, Smokey became a cultural icon. Young Black America looked up to him. His sleek hair, his tailored suits, that golden smile, it all seemed perfect. He married Claudette Rogers, the only female member of the Miracles and a powerhouse in her own right. For a moment, life was magic. They had hits, happiness, elegance. To the world, Smokey Robinson had it all. But perfection never lasts. Behind the scenes, trouble was already brewing. As Motown grew, so did his closeness to Diana Ross. They were always together, writing, performing, navigating fame side by side. Berry Gordy had signed them both, and over time, the line between professional and personal blurred. Though Smokey was married, something deeper grew between him and Diana. He says it began naturally, not out of betrayal, but because they were constantly in each other's lives. But just because something feels right doesn't mean it is. While Claudette stepped away from the spotlight to raise their family, Smokey dove deeper into music and closer to Diana. Their bond became undeniable. They were spotted together at Motown events, and the photographs from that time hint at more than just friendship. Still, the media never caught on. Inside the company, whispers grew. But Smokey stayed silent for decades, and when he finally spoke about it, he called it a powerful emotional connection, something he couldn't simply walk away from. But walking away is exactly what he eventually did. He said he rediscovered his love for Claudette and didn't want to hurt her anymore. But by then, the damage was already done. Their marriage was strained, distant, and cracked by more than just time. The couple who once sang side by side now lived on opposite sides of the stage, and eventually opposite sides of life. Smokey never denied what happened. He admitted the relationship with Diana happened while he was still married, and though brief, it left a lasting scar. The emotional toll on Claudette, the gossip that followed, and the underlying tension all added up. By 1986, the couple had officially divorced. They had tried to hold it together, but too many things had pulled them apart: love, career, temptation, and pain. The final blow came when Claudette confronted a truth she already suspected. Smokey had fathered a child with another woman, someone outside the music industry. It was a turning point neither of them could come back from. She asked him to leave, and he did. With quiet acceptance, he said, "I understand. Most women have their own line, and I crossed it." He wasn't angry. He was just tired. Tired of hiding, tired of hurting, and tired of pretending that the man on stage was the same man who lived behind closed doors. Smokey kept touring, kept singing, kept living, but something in him had shifted. Because sometimes, even a legend can lose his way. And when the spotlight fades, what's left is the real story. The raw, complicated human story. The one we rarely hear. The one Smokey Robinson lived. Years down the line, Smokey Robinson found himself reflecting on the raw words Claudette had laid down at the start of their relationship. Clear, firm, unforgettable. She had said, "Don't bring me illness. Don't bring me a child." And when he broke that trust, when the truth about the child from his affair surfaced, everything they had built began to crumble. Claudette, who had once stood by his side through years of long tours, industry gossip, and emotional silence, finally walked away. That child was the final crack in a foundation that had long been worn thin. Their 1986 divorce marked the close of a 27-year marriage that had begun before the world knew Smokey's name. It was the end of a love story tied tightly to the origins of Motown. 2 children, a lifetime of music. And still, it wasn't enough to hold them together anymore. After the divorce, Claudette withdrew from the spotlight. When she did speak, it was usually about music, not about heartbreak. Smokey, on the other hand, opened up more and more with time, using interviews as confessionals. He didn't hide from what had happened. He acknowledged it as a turning point, not just for his marriage, but for his identity. The child from his affair never entered the public eye, but that boy's very existence reshaped Smokey's world. His family was gone, and that loss triggered the unraveling of everything else. His creative drive dimmed. His name started disappearing from the charts. A man once synonymous with passion and poetry became a stranger to his own rhythm. This wasn't just the collapse of a marriage. It was the slow disintegration of a legend's very essence. This was not a triumphant comeback with flashing lights and headlines. It was a quiet return to life. Smokey disappeared from the public view, not in defeat, but in quiet resurrection. People thought he had left music for good. What they didn't know was that he was starting over, on his own terms, from the ground up. But the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected. Years later, Claudette Robinson reappeared, not with a song, but with a lawsuit. In 2014, she took Smokey to court, claiming rights to the songs he'd written during their marriage. The issue wasn't just about royalties, it was about recognition. She believed she had given up her own dreams for his career, raised their children, stood in the shadows, and now deserved her share of their musical legacy. The Copyright Act of 1976 gave Smokey the legal right to reclaim ownership of his early work. But Claudette argued that under California's community property law, half of that work still belonged to her. The court battle opened up wounds that had long gone unspoken. Claudette's legal team accused Smokey of breaching a decades-old agreement, one meant to protect her share. They argued that her sacrifices had helped build his empire. Smokey's team fired back, defending his rights under copyright law, warning that the lawsuit jeopardized new deals tied to the reclaimed songs. Suddenly, this wasn't just a legal dispute. It was about legacy, fairness, and the invisible hands that shape a star's career. It raised a question that left the music world divided. If a marriage helped birth a legend's success, does the partner behind the scenes deserve credit when the spotlight returns? And that question echoed even louder when, in 1987, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted Smokey Robinson as a solo act, excluding the Miracles. Ronnie White, Bobby Rogers, Pete Moore, and yes, Claudette Robinson were missing from the honors. The industry celebrated Smokey's silky vocals and timeless hits, but many asked, where were the others who helped create those sounds? The Miracles weren't just backup, they were co-creators. Together they had shaped Motown's soul. Together they gave us classics like Shop Around, You've Really Got a Hold on Me, and Going to a Go-Go, the very building blocks of Motown magic. This wasn't just about awards or credit. It was about remembering that behind every legendary voice, there's a chorus of unsung heroes who helped carry the melody. And for Smokey Robinson, the echoes of those voices, especially Claudette's, continue to ripple through every note he ever sang. Smokey Robinson's story isn't just about music. It's about being forgotten and then remembered too late. When the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame honored him, the world expected to see the Miracles standing alongside him. But instead, it was just Smokey's name engraved into the legacy. The absence of his bandmates, the ones who shaped those iconic harmonies and lived the grind with him, was loud. Fans didn't hold back their disappointment. It wasn't just a missed credit. It felt like a betrayal of musical truth. Journalists were quick to point out that Smokey didn't shine alone. The group had lifted him, carried him, and helped him reach greatness. And now, in the spotlight, their names were missing. Claudette Robinson, the only female member and Smokey's former wife, refused to let this slight go unanswered. She took her fight to court, but the silence from Smokey, whether by choice or circumstance, left many uneasy. For years, the Miracles stood in the shadows of a history they helped write. It took nearly a quarter of a century for that oversight to be corrected. In 2012, the Hall of Fame finally welcomed the Miracles as a group. Smokey was there, witnessing the moment, perhaps with a twinge of relief. But the damage had already sunk deep. That celebration that should have happened in 1987 was now a ghost of what it could have been. The unity, the shared tears, the triumphant joy of being honored together. That was lost in time. Even as Claudette stood proudly beside the newly updated plaque, fans couldn't help but feel it was too little, too late. And then came the heartbreak that had nothing to do with awards. Smokey's personal losses ran deeper than most could imagine. Marvin Gaye, more than a peer, his confidant, his nightly phone companion, a brother in the truest sense, was gone. The calls where Marvin would share half-finished songs, the quiet encouragement Smokey offered, all silenced in a single tragic event. Marvin's death left a scar Smokey would carry forever. But it wasn't the first time he'd been forced to say goodbye to a legend. Smokey, then just 24, never forgot that lesson. And more heartbreak followed. Seal Franklin, a lifelong friend and musical director, passed in 1988. But the most devastating blow might have been the death of Aretha Franklin. From singing on Detroit porches as kids to standing on the world's biggest stages, Smokey and Aretha's bond was decades deep. When she died in 2018, Smokey didn't just speak at her funeral. He felt every word. The grief was raw, the memories vivid. Losing her was like losing part of his foundation. As the years wore on, his circle grew smaller. Bobby Rogers, with his infectious energy and velvet harmonies, died in 2013. Pete Moore, the man behind the group's vocal arrangements and steady presence, passed in 2017. The dressing rooms that were once filled with laughter and last-minute rehearsals became quieter, lonelier. Smokey had become one of the few living witnesses to an era that changed music forever. Then came the global pandemic, and with it, a battle he never saw coming. In 2020, Smokey turned 80. But instead of a grand celebration, he found himself in a hospital bed struggling to breathe. COVID-19 didn't just test his health, it threatened to steal his voice. That voice, the one that had poured out love songs for decades, was reduced to a whisper. In isolation, stripped of family, music, and movement, he feared he'd never sing again. But in a turn as dramatic as any Motown lyric, Smokey made it back. Not just to speak, but to sing. The road to recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He had stared down the possibility of silence and come back with even more strength. Smokey Robinson's story has always been about perseverance. From fronting the miracles as a shy young man in Detroit, to becoming a solo icon, to surviving heartbreak, addiction, divorce, and now disease, he never allowed pain to define him. Even when the applause faded, he stayed true to the craft. The world saw the polished performer, but behind the suit was a man who had to start over more than once. And despite everything, Smokey built a life of extraordinary success. His financial legacy tells another chapter. Over the years, Smokey Robinson owned a collection of luxurious vehicles. His prized Rolls-Royce Phantom, a classic Cadillac convertible, and a custom-painted Bentley that turned heads in LA circles. He's known for his taste in timepieces too, sporting Rolex Presidents and Audemars Piguet models that reflect quiet elegance rather than excess. His real estate ventures included multiple homes, most notably a stunning estate in Encino and a retreat in Las Vegas. Private air travel became a norm with chartered jets during tours. As a savvy businessman, Smokey invested in publishing rights and even co-owned part of a wine label in California. His insurance strategies were just as meticulous. Policies protecting his vocal cords, luxury assets, and health, ensuring legacy preservation. His financial path teaches us that quiet discipline, creative ownership, and long-term vision outweigh flashy spending. If Smokey's story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you soon with more untold stories, more legends, and more reasons to believe that music still heals.